Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for coming. My name is Sarah Nawab. I use she, her, hers pronouns, and I am an attorney and Equal Justice Works Fellow with Prisoners Legal Services of Massachusetts. I'm also the author of the report, A Different Way Forward, which we are gathered here today to discuss, and I will be your host and moderator for the evening. From here, I would love to turn it over to our panelists to introduce themselves.
Hi, good evening. My name is Mallory Honora, and I'm the Director of Families for Justice as Healing. And our mission is to end the incarceration of women and girls. And I'm very honored to be here, and I'm sure I'll tell you more about that later. And this is Keone and Jakai, and thank you for the grace of allowing me to parent and also be a panelist at the same time. There's a lot of movement aunties in the space, so I felt like we could bring the kids and just make it work. So
we've always make it work, right? So thank you, Mallory. Thank you. Hi, everybody. I'm Stacy Borden. I'm the Executive Director of New Beginnings Reentry Services. 36 Gaston Street is our residential home, so welcome. Welcome. I'm so honored that you're hosting, or that we're hosting you here. This is beautiful. This is what our space is about. Use and occupancy, and talk about women's issues. Our mission is to provide services to women coming out of federal and state prisons, something that hasn't been done before as a former incarcerated woman. So thank you for coming. I just got tongue-tied.
Thank you, Stacy. My name is Jasmine Borges. I am a bail organizer with the Massachusetts Bail Fund. I am also formerly incarcerated, and the mission at the Mass Bail Fund is to end pretrial detention and cash bail in the state of Massachusetts.
And we thank you all for bearing with us as we pass one mic around. We were going to have two, but we had some tech difficulties, so thank you very much for your grace. And thank you all for introducing yourselves. From here, I'll give a quick introduction about Prisoners Legal Services and the Women's Project, and also give a quick summary of the report for folks who haven't had a chance to read it. So Prisoners Legal Services of Massachusetts, or PLS, is a statewide legal services provider specifically for incarcerated people in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, and is one of a small handful of organizations doing prisoners' rights advocacy in the state. The Women's Incarceration Conditions and Reentry Project, or Women's Project at PLS, aims to bring attention to the unique experiences of incarcerated women throughout Massachusetts. Over the last 2 years, the Women's Project has been funded through an Equal Justice Works Fellowship, generously sponsored by General Electric Company and Choate Hall & Stewart. Before I start detailing the report, I just want to give a quick content warning. The report discusses sexual violence against women, harassment, and overt and systemic racism, and we will be discussing those issues this evening, so please practice self-care as we debrief together. As to the report, A Different Way Forward, the Women's Project interviewed and surveyed several women, both cisgender and transgender, incarcerated throughout Massachusetts, regarding their experiences prior to and during incarceration. These women shared their stories around violence, trauma, mental health, and identity-based discrimination. The overwhelming majority of women interviewed and surveyed reported that they had either experienced or witnessed sexual misconduct or harassment by correctional or other staff. Women also reported experiencing physical violence and threats of violence by prison staff, as well as verbal bullying from staff. Women throughout the Commonwealth reported pervasive retaliation for reporting staff sexual misconduct, and several women reported that they had experienced physical and sexual violence prior to incarceration as well. Women also reported experiences and conditions in Massachusetts prisons and jails that have exacerbated mental illness, and also reported that mental health care is woefully inadequate to virtually non-existent. Transgender women incarcerated throughout Massachusetts reported a lack of access to gender-affirming health care and gender-affirming resources and programming, and reported spending extended periods of time in solitary confinement. Transgender women also reported undergoing unclothed searches conducted by male officers, despite having specified their preference to have female officers conduct those searches, and also reported experiencing harassment based on their transgender status. Incarcerated women who are Black, Indigenous, and people of color, or BIPOC, reported issues of racism. Some women reported that officers engaged in overtly racist behavior, including using racial slurs. BIPOC incarcerated women reported experiencing job discrimination and worse medical and mental health care as compared to white incarcerated women. BIPOC incarcerated women with English as a second language reported struggling to be heard, understood, and addressed due to inadequate interpretation services. Black incarcerated women reported that the canteen does not carry hair, skin, and hygiene products appropriate for their skin type, hair texture, and health. Much of the harm that both cisgender and transgender women face at the hands of correctional staff is in contravention of law, and yet continually occurs with impunity. Violence and trauma are intrinsic to incarceration. The very act of placing a person behind bars is violent, and the surveillance inherent to incarceration, particularly when exercised by men with state-sanctioned authority over women in custody, is traumatic. There is no form of prison, jail, or system of incarceration that will ever be responsive to trauma women undergo in their lives. To adequately respond to and remedy the harm women face in these systems, we must reduce reliance on punishment and shift resources to community-based systems of care that are equipped to support human dignity. PLS's Women's Project recommends the following actions, which we all will discuss in more detail this evening, to respond to trauma women face in criminal and carceral systems. First, establish independent oversight. Second, decarcerate. Third, facilitate women's reentry. Fourth, reduce reliance on incarceration. And fifth, fund communities and community responses to harm. So I'll start by asking for just any initial reactions our panelists had to the report. Stacy, would you like to start?
So, if you don't mind, Sarah, I want to bring our sister Andrea James in the space. Andrea James is the founder of Families for Justice's Healing, the National Council for Incarcerated and Formerly Incarcerated Women and Girls. And I want to just say our prayers are with you. She lost her husband Monday, tragic. And I just needed to bring her in the space. We love you, Andrea. So the reaction to the report was nothing new to me. I mean, I'm formerly incarcerated. I spent a lot of years up in Framingham. And, you know, the report was so accurate. When I started reading, I was like, wow. I mean, some of the things are just hidden. Some of the sexual assaults are hidden. It's not new. I mean, it's been going on for decades. I'm almost embarrassed to say I've been going in and out of Framingham since 1982. In the 80s and 90s, it was pretty bad. Going closer to 2000s, it was starting to be like subtle. The racism part of what I really experienced was pretty traumatic for me. Every time I read it and every time I think about, you know, the injustices in that prison, I don't think that I ever really endured racism in a sense that I think of black people, brown people coming from the southern states. And the southern prisons are really cruel and unusual. All of it is cruel and unusual. But the time that I spent this past 13 years ago, the end of it, I was locking my hair. I put braids in my hair and I put thread in it. I put black in the front and I put different colors of thread in the back so I didn't have to see the different colors. But as I entered the cafeteria, a sergeant asked me what's going on with my hair. What was in it? And I said thread. I don't know if you remember this, Kim.
Yes, I do.
But I'm standing there looking at him. He says, give me your badge. Give me your ID. So I gave it to him. And he said, how'd you get thread in your hair? And I said, with a needle. Automatically, he calls down the unit for them to check my room, strip it, tear it up. That's what they do. Yeah. And he said, well, where did you get the needle? He was ready to cuff me up and send me to the hole. And I said, well, you don't know. I mean, you work in here. You're a sergeant. It's on your canteen list. So he thought I was being a smart ass. And I mean, I ended up going to the hole anyway. But the bottom line is, he looked at his officer and said, what do you think about that? What do you think about her hair? And the white officer said, you people do that to your hair so the birds can shit in it in the summertime. I can't even express to you what I felt. All I could look at him and all I heard was, you people. You people. You people try to get like us to get locks in your hair. And they called them dreadlocks. I said, there's nothing dreadful about me, dude. You need to find some history. You know what I'm saying? They're Nubian locks. That's our people. So I can't tell you that I got sent to the hole. I don't even know why. I might have lost it or something in there. I don't even remember. I did. Stop it. I guess I did.
If you didn't, you wouldn't need a reason.
So, you know, when I think about the history of going in and out of there, and you think about people like Rachel Day, who isn't here anymore, who was sexually violated in there, who was shipped out of the prison because she was impregnated, and was brought back after she had the baby. 2 weeks later, she was dead. They said she hung herself, and we just never believed it. So when I tell you that we should not have prisons for women and girls, nor men, we don't have to have women and girls in cages.
Thank you. As Stacey mentioned, I do just like to zoom out and honor the history for a second. As Stacey mentioned, Families for Justice as Healing and the National Council for Incarcerated and Formerly Incarcerated Women and Girls was founded by Andrea James and the sisters inside Danbury Federal Correctional Institute, including Grandma, Phyllis Hardy, and Shay, Sister Virginia, and Taz. And John James at home, just holding the sisters down and just making sure they had absolutely everything that they could get. He made sure that they had and was in the visiting room every week, and also part of the bedrock and foundation of Families for Justice as Healing. So we just need to pay homage. So, and Andrea talks about hearing a conversation in the prison yard on the radio back in 2010. About criminal justice reform in the national context, and not hearing any, I swear to God, I'm going to clean up your deck. I'm so sorry. Not hearing any mention of women whatsoever, as if this country didn't incarcerate women at all, and as if there wasn't a meteoric rise in the number of women that were incarcerated. And so the founders of Families for Justice as Healing made a commitment first and foremost to fight to free each other, as well as to bring the voices of the most directly affected women to the table, and change the conversation and shift the ground. So my initial reaction to the report was first and foremost like, thank you for giving sisters the opportunity to tell the truth and be heard. And also, when sisters inside do already tell the truth, they're met with brutal punishment, right? And so there's something about using the institutional power of being an attorney and being a legal organization to put something on a glossy piece of paper, and then you can force legislators to have to confront it, right? To force policymakers to confront it, when so often sisters inside have been doing that same advocacy and organizing, but being punished for it rather than recognized for the truth of it. So it was sounded incredibly familiar to the messages that we are getting from women inside all the time. And also, it was a necessary organizing tool as the state is trying to build yet another women's prison and have the audacity to put the branding of trauma-informed on it as if it could be anything else but the violence that's described in the report, and that all the women inside have continued to say is actually daily reality. It is not an extraordinary circumstance. It is just the daily degradation that women are forced to suffer through, and still manage to take beautiful care of one another through. I do want to say that I really appreciate the framing of the report. A different way forward. We know something different and better is possible. We know that the offering of a new women's prison, we are rejecting it as a community, as directly affected women, and saying we deserve better, women deserve better than yet another prison. We discussed what to do with women who were incarcerated 150 years ago in the very first county commissioner of prisons report in 1870. They said, we're incarcerating women with men in Massachusetts. What should we do with women instead? And their big idea was to build Framingham. So building another women's prison is a 150-year-old solution, and it is time to put that to rest. So I really appreciate that the recommendations after women told what they went through honored those experiences with real and meaningful recommendations to actually do something different. And, you know, the state paid $250,000 for a report called a strategic plan for incarcerated women, and they totally minimized the voices of women inside who were describing the same experiences, but they were footnoted, shoved into one paragraph, undermined, and then the women that said don't build this project were made to look crazy in the report. So it's super needed, and we're really grateful to have it.
Thank you, Stacy and Mallory, for just touching on all those amazing points and truthful points. When Sarah first approached me about this report, I thought, how do we protect the women that are going to come forward? You know, their safety was first and foremost on my mind, to make sure that there was no retaliation, because as a formerly incarcerated woman who served 12 years at MCI Framingham, I'm well aware of retaliation there. So my initial feelings and reactions towards the report is that when you first enter the system, the first thing upon arrest, they say you have the right to remain silent. And you continue to be silenced throughout your court proceedings. You continue to be silenced in prison. So when Sarah and PLS approached me with this, I was like, yes, let's give these women the voice that they deserve, the platform to be heard. And I am grateful that you took the love and care, and you had this intention behind this report that had a lot of integrity. And I appreciate you for that, because the women did have that voice. They did tell their stories, and they were kept safe, you know? And I really appreciate you and PLS for doing that for them.
Jasmine, we're just starting. I've already got a lump in my throat. So one thing, you all, this is, as Jasmine was saying, this report highlights a number of individual stories. But underlying all of those individual stories are themes that paint a picture of a system that creates violence and creates harm and creates dehumanization. And you all have started to touch on this a little bit, but I would love to get more of your thoughts about the systems that have created the harms that women face inside. Because again, there are plans to build a new women's prison and claims that it's going to be trauma-informed, but this is a systemic issue. The trauma is systemic. So I'd love to hear your thoughts on the systemic aspect of this.
Well, sometimes when you suffer so much trauma, you don't even know where to start. Still in the traumatic state. You know, as you was asking that, I was really thinking about, you know, I'm always thinking about the women who saved me. Kimmy don't really like me to bring her into this, but that was my cellmate. And, you know, when you think about going into a prison, you're really thinking about in the male sense. Because we always, you know, mass incarceration has always been about men, and women have never been talked about. And so now that we're really starting to emerge and discuss women issues, and the prison, the system, Massachusetts wants to build or revise a new women's prison, which indicates we're making some noise here. So let me just put that out there. Because there was no way, if that prison is built in 1877, should have never gotten to be 2022. It should have been condemned years ago. Condemned. But when we think about how many women go into the prison system, we need to know, you said some numbers. You said the statistics. In the country, it's 97% of women that enter the carceral system come from sexual and domestic violence. I could never articulate what happened to me as a young child being sexually molested and an 18-year-old girl being raped. And I'm trying to suppress it with drugs. And then I get busted because I'm writing checks to suppress it. I have no idea what happens in a court. I'm not a lawyer. I have no idea how to charge someone with anything. I'm not the police. I have no idea how to defend myself because I'm not a defense attorney. And I'm not white. Often you go into these courtrooms and you see nobody that looks like you. I have no idea what the language is that they're talking about. All I know is that they're reading something and they're not even looking at me in a humanistic way. Never was humanized until 2008. But imagine going into a prison and I'm crying. You said it. We can't cry. When you're in there for many, many years and you're trying to articulate the pain because you're having a trigger or a flashback, your experiences never leave you, and the prison don't give us the tools to deal with it. Trauma-informed care in prison? Are you kidding me? Pretty pink walls? Daycare center for our children? And I'm still triggered after I come out of your little 1 hour session and I'm going back into population with a male CO who doesn't care nothing about me because he's trained militantly. God forbid I say something, I'm strapped to a chair and I'm muzzled. Or better yet, we go into a hole in a white padded room because so often we're like, I don't care if you put me in the hole, that's just another unit. But now they padded the walls. White. That causes a lot more trauma and insanity. You lose your friggin' mind. So really, you're just suppressing and oppressing me in my emotions. When I could never even talk about what happened to me. It's called post-traumatic stress disorder. It comes later. So I had no idea. I had no idea what dissociative disorder means or meant. I didn't realize I disassociated. I used to check out. I had no idea while I was fighting all the time. And then here comes a whole bunch of males jumping on you, dragging you down to the hole. Hi, Angie. I mean, I don't even know if I answered the question. I think I just went into a traumatic moment myself, re-triggered myself again. But you know, these things, they have to be talked about. This is why the world and students and people that are interested in saying no to no new women's prisons, you need to know what happens. We have to think different. We can't keep thinking and being indoctrinated in crime and punishment. And that's the only solution. There is no solution. You don't get any help in prison. None. You could come out with degrees. I mean, I went in there and got educated. I went in there, I went straight to the law library. I got a job. Angie Jefferson, she just walked in the room. That was our mother of the prison. She would always say, go do something with yourself. Go to school. Stop coming back in here. You're going to be in here for the rest of your life. I never even programmed in my head that there's really life. Wait, what? We have prisons that you will never come out of? When I tell you there's something shifted in my head to see the reality of someone who's in there for the rest of their life with no help, with no support, with no way to deal with your emotions, it changed me forever. And I'm so grateful to you, Mallory and Andrea, and the brothers that are coming home that know that we have to do something different. Families for Justice's Healing was available. I came home in 2010. I thought I really lost my mind because I saw Angie Jefferson down Nubian Square. It was Dudley Station then. And I couldn't process. I was like, how'd you get out before me? Or how'd you get out right behind me? You just told me you had a natural life sentence. I was daydreaming. And I turned back around and I didn't see her no more. And I ran home and I wrote her. And I said, I just saw you down Dudley, sis. You get ready to come home. And I ran into, you all was over on 7th Street in JP. And I heard the work they did, and something clicked in me. I said, we can bring Angie home. We can bring all the women home. We can really get busy with participatory defense, organizing. We can really bring our sisters home, and we can keep them out. So the whole model with me and Andrea was, sis, you can shut jails down. You're going to get them out. then I got to do something to keep them out. And here we are 13 years later, and my cellmate is here, Kimia Faust, who was part of my childhood healing. I danced last night, Kimmy. I just want you to know. I got on the floor because she taught me how to play. She taught me how to dance. She taught me how to laugh. Dr. Collins is in the house, too, over here. Got me on the floor dancing and laughing. I had no idea what I was doing, but I had a blast. But that comes from this young woman who saved that part of my soul. And the other womanhood part of me was Angie Jefferson, who I am proud to say that we brought her home after 31 years. She no longer has to deal with that prison and oppression anymore. And so that's the work here at New Beginners Reentry Services in partnership with Families for Justice's Healing and Participatory Defense Organizing. We mean business, and we're ready to bring the rest of our sisters home. So we're shutting jails down.
Word. You said amen. Something that you tell me that always like is very heavy in my heart is when you just talk about the experience of going in and out of court, in and out of court, in and out of court, and how dehumanizing that was, and zero people ever were like, what did you need? What do you need? Why are you here? Why do you, and that just that absence of addressing why people end up entangled in the criminal legal system. And so we're an abolitionist organization. We recognize the contemporary criminal legal system as an extension of the system of slavery. We recognize that its job is social and racial control. And we also recognize, practically speaking, that the only meaningful investment in communities, particularly communities of color, is just policing, just prosecution, and just incarceration. And if that's the only resource, if that's the only infrastructure that's invested in, then it's going to produce the outcome of generations of harm and trauma and erode community ability to take care of community self, right? Erode self-determination and autonomy that communities are still, of course, fighting back, but destroying the community infrastructure and leading to what we see now. And so our approach to the work is, also, there's a lot of players in the landscape, right? So some larger nonprofits want to do something called reimagining prisons, and that's a lot about changing the wall color or reimagining public safety. So we call our approach to the work reimagining communities, and I think that's the systemic piece that you're talking about. So reimagining communities is a vision that came from incarcerated and formerly incarcerated women, years of town hall and kitchen table conversations to shape out that vision of like, what did you need that you didn't get? And what's your vision of your community that you want? What does a thriving community mean to you? And though that's the community infrastructure, those are the community-led solutions that stop the flow of our people into jail and prison. And so, like when we think about abolition, we think about the burning down piece, which we should absolutely do. We should get our people out and we should burn the buildings down and rebuild on the ground. But then there's that presence piece, like what are we building up? So you built up New Beginnings, right? We built up a guaranteed basic income program, $500 a month, cash relief, no questions asked. Whatever you as a directly affected woman need for your family, you get that. And that money was raised by formerly incarcerated women, given to incarcerated and formerly incarcerated women. So, cash relief, guaranteed basic income program, that's a community-led solution. That's a shift in the infrastructure. That's a systemic change. Give women money and housing so they can take care of themselves and their families and rebuild their lives. So we have a guaranteed basic housing pilot, very small right now, but step by step, paying women's rent for a year just to be able to worry about something else, that you have like solid ground that you can, start to move towards your dreams and your vision of what you want for your life. Because when we talked to sisters, we did a listening tour of 150 women in Boston, and they said the number one reason they got caught up with the criminal legal system is a lack of dignified housing. So we know the systemic issues that are landing people on jail and prison bunks, and so we're fighting to change the constant increase in investment in just the carceral state, right? In just policing, just prosecution, just prison, and shift those investments to community-led solutions.
Yeah, what they said. That everything they said, right? I think I just wanna really just shout out Stacy. Do you know what I'm saying? I met you back in like 2010, I think it was, and we had our little thing, but I want to give you a shout out because I know it wasn't hard to build what you built, and you kept the women in your heart, especially Kimya. So I want to just acknowledge you and appreciate you and show you love because you deserve it. You're amazing, and everything that you've worked hard for is coming to fruition. And I'm just really grateful to know you. Thank you so much. And I'm giving this love and appreciation because when you're behind the wall, there's this hopelessness that you're not seen, that you're not heard, that you don't matter, you know, and the carceral system reinforces that. They tell you you're no longer Jasmine Borges, but you're F80744. Do you understand what I'm saying? I've been home 3.5 years later, 3.5 years now, and I still have that number right here memorized.
Oh, yeah.
Do you know what I'm saying? We want to talk about trauma. It's like I lost the right to my body. You know what I'm saying? This dude is now telling me what I can do and can't do with my own body. You have to sit there. You can't. You have to have your ID on your upper left quadrant. No, this is breast. I have breast. You know what I'm saying? And I couldn't wear women's clothing. I couldn't wear women's makeup. I had to wear men's clothing. You know, so I lost my woman identity, and then I lost the right to parent my children because I have 2 daughters. They were 5 and 11 months old when I went in. When I came home, they were 18 and 13 years old. So I lost all that time with them, and then every time there was a code, I had to hang up the phone. If there was a code, the visiting room had to be exited, and I had to lose my visit. So, and then my mail was monitored. There's just this big disempowerment. You know, you don't have the right to be fully human. And that continues even on the outside, right? Because now I have a Corey, and now they tell me what jobs I'm eligible for, and the jobs that I am eligible for are not meaningful jobs, right? And thankfully, we do have abolitionist organizations willing to train up formerly incarcerated men and women and give us meaningful employment, and that's what I found at Mass Bail Fund. And I just want to say that the trauma is real. You know, you can't really deal with the trauma that you're experiencing while you're there because you have collective trauma. Everybody's being traumatized at the same time. Then you have witnessing trauma, which is you're witnessing your sisters being brutalized, rape. The number of women I've seen self-harm because they couldn't cope, it's outrageous, you know? And they're in pain, and you're witnessing their pain, and you become in pain. Now you're hurting because they're hurting. You know what I'm saying? And then you have your own personal trauma, the shit that you came in with, and then the shit that you endure, right? The body searches, the strip searches, just everything about the whole situation is wrong. And no one should be in a cage, period. I don't care what you did, how you did it, and when you did it. I'm saying, period. Nobody deserves to be in a cage, and I'm asking for abolition now.
Thank you all. I just want to take a few seconds to just pause and sit with everything that we've just heard because it's been very heavy. And I think it's something that we should sit with. And I really want to thank Stacy and Jasmine especially for being so open and brave and telling your stories yet again. So just a few moments, I'd just like to pause. Thank you. From here, I'd actually like to turn to the recommendations of the report, because obviously what you all have talked about, obviously this system is not working and we need a different way forward. So the report recommends establishing independent oversight of DOC and sheriffs, decarceration, facilitating women's reentry. I feel the same way. Reducing reliance on incarceration and funding communities and community responses to harm. And of course, Mallory, you've already talked about the other report, the Ripples report, which recommends a so-called trauma-informed prison, which we know does not exist because prisons are places of trauma. They inflict trauma. And so one of the things that we hear over and over again when we say, we need abolition, we need to let women out, we need to fund communities, is that we'll always need to incarcerate women and they need a nicer place to live, and we haven't articulated any clear alternatives. So I'd love to hear all of your thoughts on the recommendations in the report, which were largely following the lead of the community, and what a different way forward actually concretely really looks like. And I think we've already touched on how New Beginnings is part of that and how FJA is part of that, but I'd love to hear more from all of you.
I think the first thing that I'm thinking of is Amon Coleman, who's sitting in the audience, who does transformational work. I say it often that, we can't rely on the system if you come out of a system that's caused harm. You can't rely on a system. As you said, Melanie, one judge in 2008 asked me, what's wrong with you? I think you said somebody said on a Zoom the other night, you probably should have asked me in a different way. But in that moment, I felt humanized. But it took all them years. Couldn't they have given me some help? Couldn't they have asked me what you're doing, why you're doing what you're doing? Do you need any help? I had substance abuse issues and mental health. I have a mental illness. Anybody that is raped or go through domestic violence causes disorders. And so when we think about coming out of the prison system, you don't just come out and you're okay. You're looking for something to be normal. There's no normalcy coming from an abnormal experience. And so we need somebody like Amon to give us some transform harm, some restorative justice. What does that mean? That kind of means that we need to stop facing the harm that was caused to us so we could heal from it. And then we can start transforming the idea that maybe I caused harm too, and now how do I ask for forgiveness or practice to lead toward restorativeness? Doesn't happen enough. There's so many advocates out here that, we got people fighting for prisoners' rights. We have people fighting for parole and justices. We're fighting for life without parole. But we are victims, and there's victims out there. We don't often say we're victims. Hurt people hurt people. And the more that we continue to advocate for these things, the victims are saying no. Their pain is surfacing again and again. Every time the parole advocate says it's time to end life without parole, and then you have people that thought you're going to be away for the rest of your life because you harm my people, they never get to heal. They never get to heal because we don't bring them in the spaces. I have to say that one of our ladies that was coming here, we got a phone call saying that the victim's family was coming to blow up the house or doing a drive-by shooting or some shit. I'm like, excuse my language, I swear too much. I'm sorry. And so the parole officer said, well, we can't release her unless you say so. I was like, oh, now we got the power? Release all of them. Now we got power? So I said, sir, you should be releasing her immediately. We're in our own community. That's expected. I don't think that anybody wants to go to prison after someone that they knew went to prison for life and now is coming home after all them years. I don't think they want to experience that. So we're not going to be afraid of that. We fought hard to be in this community. And we fought hard to be in a community because we're often sent out of the community, which is another traumatic experience because we don't come from those cultures. We don't know nothing about going over there to and I knew how to go steal over there, but I didn't never have that type of money. Then you want to force me out there, and bringing our people out to those communities brings a whole bunch of revenue, a whole bunch of money to those communities because the correctional officers are out there in those pre-releases. Those halfway houses are employing people, which means they got to stop at the gas station. That brings money to that community. They got to stop at a store. That brings money in that community. They stop to get lunch at the grocery store. That brings money. And then you got to come back here after you finish dealing with them over there, getting all your money that you earned $1 or 50 cents a day. You know how long it takes to get to $150? Months. And you saved all that, now you got to spend it out in the white communities? Well, like, absolutely not. You're going to come back in here because it's double trauma. You send them out there, spend all your money out there, and then you come back into your black and brown community. You're not even wanted and welcomed here, and you're threatened and a whole bunch of stuff. And now you're re-traumatized, and then there's no resources. So we have to create them. We have to create resources. We have to create job opportunities, career opportunities. One of the things that was so special about acquiring this home that the funders saw in us, that I came over here when it was up for sale, and I ran through this house chasing everybody out that was looking to buy it, right? I was like, hey, can you imagine women living in there coming from prison? Can you imagine helping, getting them to a point where they have a career? They might be able to own a florist on Blue Hill Ave. How about we could change the whole trajectory of this community by building our people up? Isn't that some of the work you do too? Building up people, not prisons. We got to build our people up to own some stuff. I just keep having a dream that I could go on Blue Hill Ave, go in a coffee store. How about a cup of coffee is the same cost as you would sell crack? You can own a coffee store right here. You have less consequences, or absolutely no consequences as far as going to prison. But imagine being out here on Blue Hill Ave, opening up your laptop, and I come in and I see you, sis. And you buy me a cup of coffee, and we sit there and chat, because we can do that in our community, because other communities have that. How about we go across the street and buy some flowers for our mamas or our sisters who just came home, because we don't have that either. We plan to do that in this house. That's what this house is about. Targeting the trauma through the world of arts, creativity. We have a theater in the basement. We have a whole bunch of partnerships educationally. We're saying don't come to us unless you're going to really offer us some real stuff for our ladies, so we can get them to a point in their life where they don't only have reunification with their children, or they're able to get to a point of self-sustainability to know how to pay their rent or mortgage. Those things aren't too far away as we used to think they were. Everything's possible. And so it was meaningful, it was purposeful to be in this community. They beat us up trying to get in here. It took us 2 years to overcome the challenges of our own community, who said absolutely not in their backyard. And so we fought them tooth and nail, our own people. And we won.
I just want to talk for 1 second about how absolutely possible, doable, and urgently necessary it is to empty Framingham of all the women inside and close it forever. It's 100% possible, and not in a long time, now, right now. So there is 200 women inside Framingham. 37 of them are pretrial women from Middlesex County. Unacceptable. I'm so honored to be on the panel with my comrade over here trying to end pretrial detention in Massachusetts, period, no matter what. And unfortunately, because of the pushing that we've been doing as organizers, we're also seeing some blowback. Unfortunately, we saw Governor Baker's vile attempt to try to expand pretrial detention and sabotage no-cost calls for our incarcerated loved ones. We also saw other some legislators buy into that idea that in fact we need to expand the ability to hold people in pretrial detention without bail indefinitely. So we should be bringing all women who are not convicted of anything home immediately. So that's 37 women home from Framingham. There's county sentence women inside Framingham, and there's state sentence women inside of Framingham. 140-ish state sentence women inside of Framingham. So there's 7 women in their 70s right now. And as the sisters in here well know, every single day, I get an email or a call about a woman inside, not just on her behalf, about some other woman that she's deeply concerned about. A woman with dementia that is constantly being screamed at by COs that do not have any compassion or patience for her. Why? What are we doing? What are we doing with 70-year-old women inside of Framingham grandmothers? There are 23 women serving life without parole, and there used to be more than that. And they're not there because we fought to bring them home, right? Because their children fought relentlessly for decades to bring them home. Women who have served 20, 30, more than 30 years already. So there is, and then we have sisters, second-degree lifers who have been denied over and over and over and over again. Their sentences extended by an inhuman number of years who could have been home a long time ago, but our regressive parole board continues to punish them at every opportunity. So those sisters already have a doorway home. They should have been through it a long time ago. But there's nothing in Massachusetts law that defines what a prison is. So you don't, even if you are in the custody of the DOC, and we do not want women in the custody of the DOC, but even if you are in the custody of the DOC, you do not have to be inside a prison building. You can be home in the community to do your sentence. We have clemency, which the governor has abjectly failed to use. He did it for 2 brothers, thank God, but did you know he made them see the parole board? He didn't even just let them out. He still made them see the parole board, right? So clemency is a tool that could be bringing our sisters home. And when we're talking about the numbers of women that we're talking about, we should be case reviewing every single sister's case that is serving a long time and being like, are there any constitutional issues? Did this woman experience racial injustice? Of course she did. So let's look at her case seriously and figure out a pathway for her home, right? Medical parole, wildly underutilized and deeply racist. Black people not being offered relief by the Department of Correction. And let's also talk about not incarcerating people until they die at nursing homes either, right? But bringing people back to the community to live dignified lives and receive dignified health care. And of course, So anyways, there are legal pathways home for every single woman inside Framingham right now. And we have the legal power, we have the social worker power, we have the psychologist and retired psychologist power. Like, we should be coming together as a community to create a plan A, B, and C home for every single woman. And we know our county sentence women also do not have to be incarcerated whatsoever, not at Framingham. And Rose here, shout out to Ro, like, there also is a building campaign to shut down South Bay, the women's wing at South Bay as well. So we also don't want to ignore that. So in any case, decarceration is fully possible. There's a pathway to do it. There's clear steps to make it happen, and we should be working on it right now. So there actually doesn't need to be a new women's prison because there doesn't need to be anybody in it. And then we get to the community-led solutions piece, right? Okay, so how are we gonna stop the sisters from going in? How are we gonna stop that pipeline? And that's investment in communities, that's reimagining communities, that's community-led solutions, that's housing first, that's making sure women have a safe and dignified place to live, that's cooperative businesses owned by formerly incarcerated Black women, talking about making the neighborhoods that people wanna live in, right? And dignified work where people wanna work. And we already talked about guaranteed basic income and guaranteed basic housing, and just the opportunity to have the breathing room to organize and heal among your own people. So part of the reason why the moratorium is so powerful, that pause button, is like, give communities the breathing room and not have, just have the space and the opportunity to create what different looks like, to shift the resources and allow solutions like New Beginnings Reentry Services, like guaranteed basic income at the National Council, to actually bloom and blossom and take root and expand. And it's so doable here. It's so doable here. And we're at the precipice of, like, what are we gonna do with the future of Massachusetts? Like, we're gonna build permanent infrastructure where they're gonna incarcerate our children and our grandchildren and our great-grandchildren, or we're not gonna do that. This is the moment that we're in right now, and how imperative that the organizing is that directly affected women, and so many women here are doing. So let's do it. Let's pass the moratorium. Let's ask the legislature to come back into special session and override Governor Baker's veto of the jail and prison construction moratorium. And moving into the next session, let's demand more and better for our communities. Let's make it impossible to incarcerate somebody on a technical violation of parole. Let's establish elder parole so that all of our aging folks have an opportunity to come home. Let's drastically expand medical parole. Let's create doorways and pathways for people to come home. Let's limit how people can go in. Let's not make any new crimes. Like, we can do this. We absolutely know it's possible. And we've knocked on the doors and we've made the phone calls to like prove it. And I just thank you for being in that with us and being in that together. And I did want to say that I failed to say earlier, and there's centuries of time here, and I want to just honor that the time that people have done. And part of the reason I'm an imperfect messenger for this panel, and part of the reason that I am a messenger is I have the privilege of not being on paper. So I also want to talk about how sisters are stifled even when they come home, when they're on lifetime punishment and lifetime parole and feel like they cannot use their voice because the system is lording over their every breath, trying to snatch them back up. And so that's the reality of what women sitting right near me are dealing with. And so I just want to honor that truth as well. And sisters fighting in their own way, however they can. And also that's why this report was so important as well.
So why don't we just get you in office, Mal? How about we get all of our sisters in office? And how about we put some people in position that can, like the governor's council, where we could appoint judges and parole officers. Then we don't even have to deal with all this stuff. There's no law saying you can't because you're formerly incarcerated.
Yes, all of that. And I just want to add that when it comes to stakeholders in this state and in this country asking us constantly, well, what is the alternative? What is the solution to incarceration? They ask those questions because they lack imagination. Right. They lack curiosity, right? And they're also married to the carceral system, right? Because we already know that the war on drugs did not stop drug consumption, okay? People are still actively using, actively selling, and actively being over-policed in our communities and criminalized and then incarcerated, right? Both the drug dealer and the drug user. And then there's this rhetoric of tough on crime, right? They have this rhetoric going, they have tough on crime policies, and nothing's changing. Crime rates aren't going down. You know why? Because they're not seeing us for the whole individuals that we are, the entire human being that we are, right? When we get to the courthouse, we stop being human. They don't see the trauma that happened before, and they're just like, you're just gonna get locked up. You know what I'm saying? But the alternative and the solution is abolition, right? The alternative and the solution is abolition, right? Shout out to the restorative justice practitioners in the house, because that is one alternative and solution. Transformative justice is an alternative to incarceration, to the carceral system. Women empowering each other is another alternative, okay? Because we are disempowered when we go to jail or prison, but when we come out and we sit here and we do this together collectively saying that change needs to happen, that is power, okay? We are now using our power and our womanhood and our sisterhood to say that we demand change, that we will no longer be silenced, okay? That is an alternative. Healing yourself and healing someone else is another alternative. Yes. Do you know what I'm saying? The carceral system and the stakeholders lack imagination and curiosity, so they keep the purse strings closed, and they won't give us the money and to fund the resources, because we already have people like Stacy, but Stacy is only one person, and Kimya's house is only one house. We need hundreds of Stacy's, sisters like Stacy's, that have the dedication and commitment, and they're already in this audience. We're already here, but we need the funding, we need the education, we need the tools to set us up for generational wealth, okay? Because we're coming from generational poverty, and we're coming from generational incarceration, okay? So again, I'm gonna say it one more time. The stakeholders lack curiosity and imagination, but this group right here and the many others that are not here have it, and we want the resources. That's all we want, so we can help our people heal and build better communities.
I just needed to say thank you. And also, look, the system is allowed to abjectly fail, and it never gets less money. In fact, the solution is give it more money. But the burden, particularly on formerly incarcerated people, is so impossibly high. Like, it has to, like, we deserve the right to experiment as well, right? We deserve the opportunity to learn and grow and have those projects be invested in and not be shut down immediately if there's any misstep. And so, we've had people tell us directly, well, we're not sure that we can trust you with this money, or we're not sure this is a proven project. Well, your system is a proven failure. So what time is it? So I just wanted to say that part.
Thank you. So that was incredible, unsurprisingly. To close, what I would love to do is ask all of our panelists about action steps. What are steps we can take right now to start alleviating some of these issues and start building a different way forward?
I like asking. I mean, to ask is funding. I love what you just said, Mallory. I don't think the system sees us still. We're not seen as advocates. We're always seen, and I hate the word, but we're seen as inmates and felons and junkies and all those derogatory terms. In mistrust. Listen, when you said that, it hit me upside my head. Like last year, we went for a grant with the city, and we did a whole proposal, and the funding that came down from the federal government to the city, or to the state to the city, and to the county. We filled it out. We got a phone call from a TA, technical assistance agent, that the federal government hired to oversee Boston City's grant fund. And they said, hey, New Beginnings, you all wrote a hell of a grant. They hadn't seen this before. They don't never even talk about formerly incarcerated people. That underserved population has not even been talked about before in the sense of housing. It came from the economic development of housing, or whatever the term is, Economic Office of Housing Development Fund. And the technical woman said, I can't really talk to you or tell you because I'm not part of granting the grant, but I am going to say we can sit at the table and we can say, hey, we like that proposal. If you don't mind, let us meet with you and make sure that that grant gets through. And they did that. It was December. It went down to the other supervisor, and then she called me and said, hey, I want to revise it again. We wrote for $1 million. We wrote saying that we will take people, women coming out of prison, house them in a hotel due to COVID, bring them 5 at a time here. We have 10 beds. We could do 5. We could separate them. We could practice, COVID protocols. And then we'll move them into housing. We had it all lined out. The budget was tight. After Christmas, she came back and said, oh, we have to, I don't even need this mic, do I? I think the battery died. So, right after that, she came back and said, we took it down a little bit, if you don't mind, because we really can't fund your house because your house is residential. You kind of have to shift it and make it a shelter. I'm like, well, what? Wait a minute, we're not. It's a residential reentry program, reintegrating back into community. They can't live here forever. She said, I know, but we have to kind of make it like, maybe change the term from residential to transition. I said, no problem, we changed it to transition. Then they came back and said, hey, we can't discriminate against men. I'm like, oh, I do. I work with men too, no problem. I counsel a lot of them. I go in front of parole board and I advocate for their parole. Actually, we do more than that. We fight for wrongful convictions and disproportionate sentence. She said, great, let's do it. They shut it down to $600,000. And then her supervisor said, no, we can't fund that. Let's do a pilot program and give them $140,000. Well, I wasn't going to take your 600 and I wasn't going to take your 140. Because you're not going to dictate what we know how to do in this community for our people. And so I made a couple of phone calls. They're like, Stace, you're going to turn that money down? I said, what am I going to do with it? They won't fund this house. They want me basically to go to the prison, get people out, send them over to a hotel, and leave them alone. I'm like, do you understand that you're dealing with people's lives that have addictive personalities? Some people have suicide ideations. Some people have attempted to commit suicide. You just want us to house them. That's why we got that problem down Mass and Cass. So if you want to just house them, and you want to do the data that you don't even give us, because we don't even know who's coming out, where people are going. Really, the white communities are getting the funding, and because we're saying we want to be in the black and brown communities, you don't want to fund us. I think we might have a suit here. Can you give us your application for the process of appeal so we can sue your ass? They wouldn't give us the paperwork. I said, I know some people. We know Prisoners Legal Services, their attorneys, you know that, right? We also know CPCS, the Committee for Public Counsel Services, their attorneys, right? She paused and denied giving us the paper. Then she emailed it. And I said to her, do you not understand that you have just denied a formerly incarcerated black woman that you all was just hit with the suit that was in the globe? What are you doing, lady? Needless to say, she wouldn't change her mind, and we turned down that fine. It's that old statement. Sometimes you just got to take old negative behaviors and turn them into positive. We were like, old money, sometimes some money ain't good money. You're not going to dictate to us what we need to do in this community. It's a whole bunch of us growing. As soon as somebody come out of prison, somebody call me and say, go see them, I'm going to go see them. And I need to get in your mind to figure out what you want to do, and we're going to come together and bring you to where you need to go. Wherever that is. As long as it's not back to the prison system. So we know we can't rely on the system. We have to rely on each other. So, what do you need to say? Do you need the mic? Yeah?
So we're still in a live fight to pass the jail and prison construction moratorium. And as I mentioned earlier, it was passed through the House and passed through the Senate, and then it was vetoed by Governor Baker on August 4th, so after the end of the formal legislative session. So we're asking legislators to come back into formal session and override Governor Baker's veto. So asking all community members to contact their state senator and state rep and say, we can still do this. This is urgently important because the contract to design the new women's prison is live. HDR has a $550,000 contract. Like, it's happening. It's moving. And so the prison moratorium is time sensitive and urgent. And also, there was a formerly incarcerated woman-led movement across the state for the past 18 months, and that shall not be ignored or shut down. So come on back. You could do it. Have a formal session. And there's a few other critically important pieces of policy, including no-cost calls that the legislature could get done if they choose to do it. We hope they'll do it this fall. And that's an invitation, right? It's a win for the legislature. It's a win for our communities. And then we can move forward next session and continue fighting. So you can go to nonewomensprison.com and .org and see how the script that you need and where you can look up your legislator. And then also just be part of our movement. Like, come on in, because the fight to bring every single sister home from Framingham is a live fight, and we're very, very serious about it. Like, we're gonna do it. So come on in and find, most of you already are deep in the movement. So just if you're feeling a little unconnected or looking for something to do, whether that's helping to welcome sisters home and making sure that they're settled and have what they need, whether that's doing legislative advocacy and policy work, whether that's doing other types of organizing to shut down this prison project, that's what we do. And we have a supporter formation called Building Up People Not Prisons, which is volunteer organizers that are helping to move the work that's directed by formerly incarcerated women. And then also, like, we have the vision is to bring women home from Framingham, shut it down, and close it forever, not to be ever rebuilt or replaced. Again, we're gonna win that. And so one of the things that we started, a smaller campaign within that bigger campaign, is a call out to District Attorney Marion Ryan, an invitation to say, hey, you've somehow managed to avoid scrutiny in this conversation about building a new women's prison, and yet you're responsible for a third of the women that are inside MCI Framingham right now. So let's have a conversation with the experts, women who have been inside Framingham and formerly incarcerated women, about what else is possible. First and foremost, bring all these sisters on pretrial detention home right now. File a motion to revise their bail, personal recognizance, lift revocations. Like, there is a pathway home. So Middlesex County residents are coming together in planning meetings, and there's a letter right now where we're collecting signatures from constituents and organizations to confront DA Ryan with this opportunity to do something better, this invitation to get on the right side of history, right? This invitation to do better for our communities and actually create real safety and well-being. Because as we've heard over and over and over again, prison is just a site of more harm and violence. That's all it ever has been. That's all it ever will be. And so we're serious about that campaign within the campaign, and more tools and strategies like this will emerge, and we just want you to be more involved. So come sign that letter. I think it's tinyurl.com, Middlesex letter. I'm gonna get you the links. Hopefully you could do a little follow-up. Amazing.
I think my sister Mallory here is being a little humble. She didn't even tell you about the moratorium bill making it all the way to the Senate. It made it to the Senate.
No, the governor just vetoed it.
The governor vetoed it, but it made it to the Senate.
Yeah.
Laura.
Yeah, so
the policies that they wrote.
Yeah.
It made it. Well,
in one session.
They could veto it. Don't mean it's not going to go nowhere.
Yeah, exactly.
They haven't built it. We've stopped 4 architects in 4 years. 5? 4.
It's been three rounds of proposals. We stopped the first 2. So for the past 3 years, we have delayed the project.
We sat with architects and let them hear our stories, and we were hoping that women were there because we needed to let them know what's happening, that their daughters could end up in prison. One of them left out of there crying and said, I'm not building no prison. I don't want to have nothing to do with it. We said, thank you very much. Because you weren't going to build it.
Right.
By the time we finished with her.
That's right.
I just needed to share that, Mallory, because y'all do some awesome work. Who knew?
It's amazing work.
It's amazing work. It's rewarding.
Fight. Yeah, for sure. I would just like to add that at Mass Bail Fund, our call is to end pretrial detention and cash bail. Cash bail and pretrial detention is a form of keeping black and people of color incarcerated, right? We have currently people being held on a $1 bail, and that's happened multiple times. So that means that the bail clerk fee of $40 is more than the person's actual bail. Right. We have our babies, right, being held in DYS for $1 bails. And we can't get them out because DCF is involved and they won't let them out and this, that, and the third, and it's a whole thing. So we know that cash bail and pretrial detention is just one more tool and mechanism of the carceral state to keep our people incarcerated. And they haven't even been found or tried yet, right? So the call is to get involved with our work. Come volunteer. If you're an organization, come table with us. We're at Nashua Street in South Bay every Wednesday in Suffolk County. We're in Hampden County. We're in Middlesex County. We're in Essex County. And there's also 2 other bail funds operational in Plymouth County and Franklin County. Thank you.
And you can give. You can give to massbailfund.org. You can give to New Beginnings, reentryservices.org. And if you don't know, our office is right down the street at 100R Warren Street. We have a community pantry as well, open 3 days a week to just meet the basic needs of all the families in the community. You can give to the pantry as well at tinyurl.com/communitylovefundpantry. We'll get you all those links, but you can give to sustain the work.
I just want to add to that the work Roe is doing at Shutdown South Bay, that some of the people held there that died there were held on low bail. 6 people have died, but some of them have been held on low bail. Hi, baby. And that could have been prevented, right? Like 6 unnecessary deaths and no one's being held accountable, and these people were all pre-trial. And again, the call is to just get involved. Like Mallory said, contact your legislators and tell them to do the right thing. Shut down the prisons. We don't want any more prisons, and we don't want any more county jails, and we want accountability for the 6 people that died at South Bay needlessly.
Thanks, Jasmine. So from here, we might have time for maybe, I think we can do 2 questions. I want to give directly impacted people the floor to ask questions first, before anyone else. So if any directly impacted folks want to ask questions first, definitely invite that. Okay, anyone else? Questions? We've got time for 2 questions. Really? Okay. It looks like you answered it all, unsurprisingly.
Is it done? Are we done?
I think we're done.
Oh, okay.
Thank you.